Services Standing Committee.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, and that motion carries. First item under the committee agenda, we have 6 items under the committee agenda. The first one is a resolution requesting approval of a lease purchase agreement with Axon to supply tasers for our police department. We have Ms. Alig here with legal and members of the police department. So,
yes. I brought Assistant Chief Waldeck, who can explain a little bit more about why the tasers are needed. But the reason that we're in front of you all is this is technically a lease purchase agreement, which needs to be approved by the commission. We are getting the equipment up front and paying for it over a number of years.
And you want to go ahead and just tell us a few details?
Sure. This program will allow us to make tasers mandatory carry for all officers that will be on the CAD, which means all officers that will be subject to calls for service, which currently we don't have enough tasers, and the tasers that we have are starting to be outdated and not under warranty. This is a program offered by Axon, which is a 5-year payment program, and it's an incentive to update all of the tasers, and also we get training cartridges and battery cartridges and the actual taser fire cartridges included in this, along with the maintenance agreement. And this will allow us to, again, make taser mandatory carry.
Perfect.
Second.
Commissioner Philbrook.
Okay, so yeah, I read the contract over. It's pretty phenomenal. You guys did a great job. I don't know if they're doing this with a lot of the communities or not. No interest charge and all that for 5 years. That's pretty doggone good. I'll take no interest. And then the other thing is that with this, I do have a question. How long are tasers normally good for? I mean, what kind of a warranty time?
This is Officer Scott Kirkpatrick, and he has actually been in charge of the taser project with the Kansas Police Academy, and he can explain a little bit more about that.
So the tasers are generally only good for 6 years. When we purchase the tasers, they come with a 1-year warranty. As a general rule, the police department goes ahead and extends that and gets a 5-year warranty to cover those. At this time, the majority of our tasers on the police department are well outside of that warranty and are not guaranteed through Axon.
Thank you. I just wanted a couple of things clarified so the public would be able to know why we're jumping on this. Thank you.
All right, we've got a motion and a second on this item. Could we have roll call?
Roll call. Groneman? Aye. Philbrook?
Aye.
Markley?
Aye.
Kane? Aye. Johnson?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye. That motion carries, and we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second item is a resolution authorizing donation of fire department equipment, and we have Katie Devlin from legal and a member of our fire department. Thank you, Assistant Chief Smith. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, we have a resolution for authorizing the fire department to donate used lockers to Piper High School, Tonganoxie Fire Department, and the Historical Society.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further comments or questions?
You might just want to say, there is some value to them, but we're literally giving them to them, and with our blessing of them being able to use our old stuff.
Correct. They're obsolete to us. We've upgraded our lockers and our prevention of cancer for our firefighters. They do have a little bit of scrap value, but they're very old, but they're great for other departments.
Okay. Hey, we might as well share.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We have a motion and a second on this item. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Groneman. Philbrook.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Kane. Johnson.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you so much. Let's see, I think Ms. Alig's coming back. The third item is a resolution to revise our fairly new block party permit policy.
Yes, I submitted red lines showing the change to the policy. We noticed a discrepancy in the liability language that our block party applicants were being asked to agree to. In the policy, it was a very broad liability statement saying that whoever applied for a block party would be liable for basically whatever happens to anybody during the event. In our application, we had slightly less broad language that just says that the unified government is not going to be liable. So we changed our policy to match the application.
So the language in the policy will be, we're holding the UG harmless.
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments on this item? We have a motion and a second on this item. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Groneman. Philbrook.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Kane. Johnson.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye, and that motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 4, we have a presentation regarding data-driven street preservation, and we have Brandon Grover and oh, shoot. Troy Shaw. It was on the tip of my tongue. Gentlemen, you can make your presentation.
Okay, we're here to discuss the pavement preservation, and we've had a couple meetings before this. This is the third in a series of 3. So what we'll be presenting you with is some of the data we found and what we can do with this data. A very introduction to what we can do with that. It can get a lot more detailed than what we'll show, but it'll kind of give you an idea, and we'll put some numbers behind what we've been talking about for the last 3 times. So as you know, our current pavement, or our PCI index, our pavement rating, is a 56, is what we determined last time, and we've come to find out that's an average of our whole network. And Brandon's going to go over that and kind of talk about that and where we can go from here. So I'll turn it over to Brandon Grover.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Commissioners. As Troy mentioned, we wanted to highlight some of the information that we've presented to you in a couple of our other meetings so far, and also expand on that to show you what that data is really telling us and how it really gives us a look into what we can do in the future. Can't look into the future without looking into the past, so we wanted to show you quickly some information about how our pavement money has been spent in the past. We've kind of highlighted this about, with centerline miles and stuff before, but what we really wanted to highlight is our budget back in 2007 to 2011 was an average of about 2.5 or 2.4 million. We were spending all of that money on pavements. That was getting us about 29 centerline miles. In 2012 to 2017, we came under our consent decree with the Department of Justice to do ADA ramps anytime we improve a street, which is what a mill and overlay consists of. We had to take about 25% of our budget that we spent on our roads and put that towards ADA ramps at that time. That decreased our lane miles down to 22, and we were only increased about $300,000 over that time as an average. In 2018 and 2019, we even took another step further by having to do curb repairs as well, because we started seeing a lot of curb failures, which led to pavement failures, with water getting underneath the pavements themselves. So we had to take another large chunk, another 25% of our budget for pavements, and put it towards these. So between 2007 and 2019, we've really only seen a budget increase of about $1.1 million, which is quite a bit less than what you'd really see in like the cost of construction. Really right now we're seeing somewhere between 5 and 8% on that. Obviously this doesn't cover that, as well as the money we're taking out to do all these other pieces. We did gain a little bit of ground on that this year by including 10% of our budget, or roughly 10%, into a micro surface, which is what we did on Metropolitan and Quindaro. So as everybody's seen, it allows us to stretch our dollars further and get a different coating on our streets. What we're hoping to go for in the future is a little breakdown that looks similar to this. We want to put emphasis on keeping our good streets better longer. It costs us exponentially less dollars, about a sixth of the dollar value if we're maintaining a road that's above a 70 in PCI as opposed to one that's in a 40. So by keeping the best first mentality and doing the right place with the right treatment at the right time, it allows us to take our dollars to that next level. And again, as I mentioned with the curb work that we've had to do, water is the enemy of pavements. As water gets under it, you start seeing frost heaves, you start seeing edge deterioration, things like that, that just cause our roads to fail even faster. So the blue highlight, or the bluish kind of wedges of this pie are what we're anticipating to be able to put towards our pavements. We still know we're gonna have to do some ADA ramps and curbs with this money, but we're hoping to do it a little bit differently than we have in the past. So on November 6th, we sent out a request to you all as commissioners based on the driving that we asked you to do earlier in the year to give us some information about what you see in our roads. We asked a series of 5 questions. The last 2 questions were more of, did you find this helpful and what more do you want to see? So we're not going to highlight those here. But the first 3 questions were, what approach should we take? And what we talked about earlier was a full network approach versus a functional classification approach. Based on the information or the responses that we did receive from everybody, the consensus was that we should look at a functional classification approach because this allows us to assign a little bit different priority and make sure that our roads that see the highest volume can see a better quality or see a more frequent high quality. The second question is, what's an acceptable PCI score? And again, with us looking at a functional classification, we had to break this out versus arterials, collectors, and neighborhoods. Again, from the responses we did receive, we're looking at arterials around a 70, neighborhoods and local streets around a 60, and a collector somewhere in between, usually probably a 63 to a 67, depending on what kind of condition it was in prior to the improvements. And then the third question that kind of came into play is, how long should our goals, or how long should it take to reach our goals? This is a really difficult one to put a real number to for many reasons. One is, we all know there are certain constraints to how quickly we can do these kind of things. But what was kind of recommended is that we come up with a staggered series of goals to basically say, okay, we want to get our arterials and our collectors to the goals we set up by this time. Or not even to that ultimate, that 70 or 60, but say we want to improve them by 10 by this period. And then once we reach that, we reevaluate and move our next set of goals. So it'd basically be goal X by year A and goal Y by year B. We're looking at how to really develop those, and we'll be coming back to you again with those kind of things in the future to see how it all kind of pans out. What we're getting ready to go into gets not really technical, but it gets kind of in the weeds, but this is the information that we've really been trying to get to. This is what tells us what our network's going to do over the next 10 and 20 years based on our projected funding runs. So we're going to present 3 different model ideas, and we'll kind of go through each of them real quick. This first one is a 2% annual increase starting past our current budget year of 2023. Keep in mind that 2% increase doesn't even really cover estimated construction increases over those years, but that's the kind of increase we have been seeing in our budget. So that's why we just kind of kept that trend moving forward. As you can see from the trend lines, the solid color line is if we spend 80% of that budget on mill and overlay type activities and 20% on surface treatments, which are like the microsurfacing and chip seal, the newer implementations that we've just started. The dashed line is the inverse of that, where 80% of the money is spent on surface treatments versus 20% on mill and overlays. You can see that the dashed line keeps us at a little bit more level pace a little longer, but that's because we're able to touch more miles, so it holds it a little better. But as you can see, it falls off steeper because we're not really making any structural improvements. And as we've shown in the bar graph before, 70% of our network is in that really dangerous category of 40 to 65, which means it has it's at the steepest part of the deterioration curve, which means it's going to fail faster, and it's the most expensive to maintain. Anybody have any questions on this slide before I move on to the next one?
I'm just curious, a 20-year look seems like a pretty long look to me. I could see you projecting it out? I mean, for our purposes, 5 to 10.
10 years is built in here. You can see these 10-year scores. So like if we do 80% mill and overlay, our 10-year score still drops from our current 56 down to a 43. And at that 10-year line, our budget's approximately about $5 million. If you do the inverse, 80% of our surface treatments and 20% mill and overlay, we're a little bit higher at a 47. But the key thing to think about is if you look down here where 2028 is on the bottom, you see the discrepancy between the two, but you also see how quickly the gap closes.
Okay, Commissioner Philbrook.
So just to clear it up for me, when you do a complete restructure of a street, when you get down to ground layer and start over again, how long do you expect that, what kind of a lifetime should that have?
What you're talking about is what we consider a reconstruction, and that's actually not figured into this.
I know, but I still.
A complete reconstruction, if you go down to base, you restabilize that, you do the proper storm drainage, you can get probably 15 years without any kind of maintenance, but to get a real life out of a road, you'd be looking about 30 years with proper maintenance, which is crack sealing, microsurfacing, things like that.
Okay, go ahead.
And that 30 years is basically, you can get 30 years out of it without doing structural improvements to it, per se. I mean, you may be minor ones here and there as needed, but if you did the right maintenance on it and you milled and overlaid it on cycle, maybe at the 30 year, you decide, okay, well, it's mill and overlaid again, the base is still good, we've been taking care of it, you might get another 20 years out of that as well. Okay. So that's kind of where we're going with, is if we actually maintain a road like that, we can get maybe 50 years out of it before you really have to do major structural improvements to it versus the 20 that we're getting without doing improvements to it.
Well, so then if we do the mill and overlay, then you're talking, if you would do a mill and overlay on a poor base, right?
In the past.
I know we have, but we're talking about the future.
Yes. Yes, you are correct.
And so you wouldn't, supposedly. And so that would extend it 20 years?
Mill and overlay on a good surface gets about 15 years, again, with proper maintenance. The thing to keep in mind about when you're looking at those two options, the full reconstruct, the going down, doing the base and all that, per mile is on a collector type road is about $2 million a mile, $2 to $2.5 million a mile.
Right.
Resurfacing is about $120,000 to $150,000 a mile, which is why we've historically done so much more of that as opposed to the reconstruct and fix the bases, just because, as you know, our budget didn't allow for that.
Well, I know, it's figure out how much you pay now versus how much you're going to pay within the next 20 years for that road.
Very true.
Yeah, and I understand, well, I think I understand that. How's that? And so then the new surfacing technique, which I've driven on, a few places. Say a little bit about that.
The microsurface that we've chosen to do currently is getting, if it's put on the right application, which is anywhere from about a 50 up to a 65. A couple of cities have gone a little bit lower than that, and they're getting about 10 years out of it. But what we've seen for the right application is about 12 to 15 at really about a sixth of the price of a mill and overlay.
For a sixth of the price of mill and overlay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't get you, it's not any kind of structural stabilization, so it'll still show some of the ravels that you see, but it seals the road and doesn't allow any more water to get underneath it at that point. It's not a corrective course, it's a maintenance course.
And so then you just use your, whatever that is, when you go fill up the
crack seal.
The crack seal.
And you'll notice Brandon emphasized a couple times for the right application. So your base has to be good. It has to be one of those roads that has been maintained or done the right way, and we haven't let the base get bad to begin with. Because if you put it on that, you won't get that lifespan out of it, because that where it's failed before will eventually fail again. So,
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you.
No problem. This next slide shows kind of another extreme case. We're again starting at that $4.5 million after 2023, which is kind of where we're currently budgeted. This is showing a 25% annual increase all the way out to 2033. So a 10-year period of 25% increase in budget. What that does for us is at that 10 years, it puts us up at about 11.7 million. And at that 20 years, which is kind of 20 years isn't really the right number. It's actually 2033, so from where we're at right now, 15 years, it puts us up at $36 million annually. That number seems incredibly high, but when you see what it can actually do for our network, it is actually really close to what is needed to make improvements at this time. So as you can see, if we do a lot of surface treatments, again by the dash line, it holds us fairly steady for a while, and we even gain a little bit, but we start falling back off again because we haven't made any real structural stabilizations. The mill and overlay, it goes down faster, but then we start building up quicker because we have a larger influx of money in those outer years that allows us to do more mileage. And I'll emphasize again, the three cases that we're showing here aren't the ones we're saying choose one of these three. These are kind of some not really outlandish scenarios, but three options. What we're really doing is a combination of all three of these because you just kind of have to, because there comes a point where you don't have to do all surface treatments or 80% surface treatments. There comes a point where you can do 40% surface treatments, and or vice versa. So that plan will be coming eventually, but we just want to show you what some of these numbers really show us.
I'll hold that question that goes right along with that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on this one before I move on?
You can just keep moving.
This next one is, we call it the mountain slide, just because of what you're seeing. This is a 25% annual increase beginning in 2020, and that 25% continues annually out to 2028. That puts us at about 6.1 million in 2018 and 29 million annually in 2028. The reason this one goes up so much faster is because we see such an influx coming in sooner. So this one starts in 2020. The other one, this other 25% one, doesn't start until really 2024. So that 4 years of continual increase allows us to touch a lot more roads with these surface treatments, which is why you see that peak coming up really, really fast, and it makes our roads look great. But once you get to that point and we haven't done any structural stabilization to the roads, it really starts falling off the cliff a lot faster. So again, what we really want to shoot for is somewhere in the middle of this that allows us to raise our PCI in an in an appropriate manner that allows us to use our funds effectively.
One thing that we'll look at this is basically how these graphs are set up. It's 20 years worth of we're doing the same thing every year for 20 years. The way our models will work is every year we'll rerun the model, and it might be this year we do need to do 80% surface treatments, and next year maybe it's 10% surface treatment. It just depends on how it comes out with how our system is, and you can kind of see that peak here, and that hits it gets really fast and it gets high because we're actually maintaining the ones right now that we're preventing from falling off over that cliff. So that's kind of why you'll see the drastic difference between this one and the previous one, even though the numbers are the same and the years moved up 4 years. It makes a big difference, but just to point out that we will redo this every year, and you'll see something different every year as the model runs, and we keep calibrating the model too. So.
And that 4 years is actually really vital because we have such a large percentage of our network that's in that 40 to 65 range, that 70%, that wave that's going to be failing at a faster rate. So that 4 years is actually very vital, and that's why we chose to move this one up to immediately as opposed to out past our current budgeted level.
Commissioner Markley.
I just wanted to say, I think maybe it's not obvious because we know how much we need to improve and we're looking at these mountains and valleys, but I mean, ultimately the goal is to get to a certain point and then have this line be flat forever, right? That's the goal, is not to have any peaks or valleys. Right. So I think it's important for us to think about that as a commission too, about how far up the mountain do we want to go before we see that line flatten out, and that's part of what they were trying to get at with that survey is, where do we want our mountain to turn into a plateau and just stay flat?
Based on the numbers we mentioned earlier that we received back from you guys, is that 70 for our arterials is about right here. So it's about 3/4 of the way up that peak or up that mountain before we can really start flattening out again. You can see the exact almost inverse of that down here on the bottom, just because we still have so much more to maintain.
Because our neighborhood streets, we were looking at potentially a lower PCI. Does it make sense for that to be our first goal because it's the easier one for us to reach? I mean, if we could bring everything up to the 60 and then we could keep bringing the other ones up, would that be a situation that would put us in a better position?
It's kind of a catch-22 in the fact that it seems like it would be easier because it's only 4 points away from where our current network average is. But what to keep in mind is that arterials and collectors deteriorate faster because they see more traffic. And we also have a much larger volume of neighborhoods than we do arterials and collectors. So as we start running more of these models ourselves, the company we contracted with, IMS, is the one who's run these models for us so far because they've been building our system. Now that we have it and they're showing us how to do it, we can run much more intricate models to do that kind of look into. So that will be something we look at. Just currently, their current model takes into account roads that see higher ADTs or traffic volumes first.
And another thing that the model will take into consideration is different costs for rebuilds of arterials versus local streets. So if you let your arterials fall off too far, it costs a lot more money to rebuild an arterial street than it does a local street if you let that fall off. So it's kind of a trade-off, but we enter numbers for that, and it helps calibrate that as far as moving forward, which ones it recommends doing too. So, yeah.
And this is just a combination of all those other 3 graphs, so you can see the difference between them. So.
Yes. Commissioner Philbrook.
So I noticed that at about 20 years out is about when it hits the fan, so to speak, right?
Yes.
And so that was going to be what I was going to address. If you have a suggestion on how to address this so it doesn't do that.
We have
What's the magic?
We have several, and we're still building that suggestion. In one of the next slides, I'll talk about our next steps moving forward, and we can kind of show you how we plan to address that. So.
Thank you.
But if you, go back to the multiple slides, Brandon. If you see this, if you look 20 years out, which puts it at 2038, there are a few models that have that line going up. Now, for example, we've taken extreme scenarios of both yellow lines, for example. If we were doing this, our line would be somewhere zagging in between there, as we did what's mill and overlay and what's microsurfacing. So once we run the models and we calibrate that every year, we anticipate that, obviously all based on funding dollars and how much you want to put into it, but we anticipate that line from where it's at now being able to be moved up faster because we'll actually plan every year to do what needs to be done, not just assume something like we're doing here. So.
And that is really what we're doing with this, is making, educated assumptions about our potential funding levels, because as that is really what's going to drive this. I know it seems kind of like a crutch to lean on to say that, oh, we need more money, but the data shows it. Everything we've shown in the last several presentations shows that what we currently have and what we're currently projected to have by these orange lines just doesn't cut it. If we want to make any kind of significant improvement or even keep where we're currently at, which I think we all agree is kind of substandard. So.
Well, I want to thank you for moving into the future for us and helping us try to figure out where to go with this, so when we do spend our money, we get the best bang for our buck. I really do. All these new programs, that we have access to now are really, I'm hopefully making a big difference. And I hope I'm around long enough to see some of this. Maybe I should live long enough so I can see what the roads look like in 20 years.
One of our hopes is that we figure out our planning system enough where we can come back to you with a live demo of that, where you can spitball numbers to us and we can plug those in and run the report instantaneously and show you what that does. We're not there yet, just because of how complex building the model is. We've got 2,400 centered lane miles of road, and breaking that up into segments and clustering it based on classifications and all that is taking a little longer than we thought, but it is something we're going to do.
Well, I'm really excited about it. I think I'm really happy somebody else is doing this, because if you were waiting for me to do it, we'd be in trouble. But I really want to see how that figures out on which areas that we have to fix first, which areas that we have to take care of, and being able to balance all that out. So thank you for doing this.
You're very welcome. So we've kind of talked about a lot of this already, but what does all this mean? What does this data really tell us? That we're going to have to do a variety of techniques over the next 10 to 20 years to really make some improvements in our network. It's going to take a lot of different things. Mainly, it's going to take some process and policy changes and practices within our own organization. Some of those practice changes are already underway with our new pothole patchers that you've seen, our crack seal crews that have been out, having a designated concrete crew that can go out before any of our pavement work and actually do some concrete repairs in spots that need them. That way we don't have to contract those out. There's a lot of things we are currently doing, and the new pavement techniques that we are doing internally and with our contracts as well. And again, I've already said it once, but improvement in our pavement network and our PCI rating is limited by a budget. So it's kind of hard to elaborate more on that, but I think we've kind of made everybody realize that there is that one linchpin that's kind of holding us back that we need to really look at. So our next steps is, based on your recommendations, we're going to develop those series of goals and those possible timeframes of when we could really hit those goals with some good funding dollars and be able to say, okay, if you give us, $15 million a year starting in this year, we can hit this in 10 years. Or if you give us $5 more million than what we're currently at, this is how long it's going to take. I know those are the numbers you guys are really wanting to see, and that's what we'll have soon. We also want to develop a 3, 5, and 10-year pavement plan. That way we can share with, not only internally, but with the public. That way people understand when their roads could be addressed and what kind of things we're looking at as we're addressing our roads. This also helps us for our planning purposes and our asset management mindset to say, okay, if we're going to go in here and do this road now, we need to get all the utilities ahead of us and get them in ahead. That way they're not cutting up a road we just redid. We also, as we kind of mentioned in the earlier slides about how the funding has been kind of pieced out to do concrete repairs and ADA repairs and stuff like that, in this next budget cycle, we're actually going to create a new line item that is for concrete repairs. That way we can truly use dedicated pavement and asphalt money for that purpose and really show some gains in that and not keep borrowing that money to do other little things that need to get done. And we're also going to keep improving our internal staff with new trainings and new techniques. All the time there's conferences about new ways to do potholes, new ways to do crack sealing, new ways to do everything. And we want to keep our internal staff as up on that as possible. That way we're getting the most efficient crews that we can. Anybody have any questions about this?
Questions from any of the other commissioners? Commissioner Johnson?
Are you willing to vote and just give us $20 million a year?
I saw you, Commissioner, look like you were doing some math over there. Did you have a question or comment?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm just trying to, it looks to me, I'm just looking at where all the intersections tend to kind of converge, and that's about 2033 versus 2034. I don't know how to interpret that, so no, I don't have any questions at this point.
That is about right. That's kind of what we've been seeing too. It's really going to take 5 to 10 years is really kind of, 10 to 15 years before we really start making some major headway, depending on how much money we're allotted at certain times.
Okay. And I want to thank you for the work and the presentation, and I know we'll continue to communicate with you. And while we segue, if you will, into our next item, which is a presentation on 2020 to 2023 Public Works CMIP, if I could just take a minute and thank, obviously, both of you, but also Mr. Fisher and Mr. Tobin, if you would extend our gratitude to all of the people that were working yesterday and into the night and probably all day today. I think that they always do a great job. And I'm personally grateful, and I think everybody else up here is as well. So thank you. If you would just share that appreciation with staff. It is sincerely appreciated. And so now we're going to have a look at 2020 to 2023 Public Works CMIP. And I'll hand it back to you.
So we'll just keep on rolling and going through this. This is an annual kind of presentation that we do for you all. In October, we talk about the next year's projects that are coming up. In November, we talk about the out years beginning in the following year. That way you can see kind of any kind of modifications we've made to project descriptions or any kind of scoping change or anything like that, as opposed to what we've been presenting several times in the budget process prior to this. Currently, we wanted to talk about the projects that you see in your budget. If you happen to have a budget in front of you, or if you look at your budget, these are the ones that are in there right now as of the amended budget that just kind of came out. The first one we'll talk about is the Bruni Elementary School road and intersection improvements. This is at 90th and Parallel. For those who don't know, there's a new elementary school being built near this intersection that combines two current elementary schools into a more modern facility. And what we've kind of negotiated through this whole process is to really turn this intersection that is staggered. Your north leg is about 100 yards to the west of where your south leg is. So there's two signals there currently, and it kind of creates a little confusion driving through it. This plan would realign that to a four-legged intersection at 90th. That would open up some developable land in that area, and if the dollars come in right, we'd kind of make a little curve, as you see highlighted up here on the screen, to re-back align with 91st Street, and that would allow the section that creates the offset intersection to close. So it'd smooth out the traffic flow in the area.
And as proposed, the project is just the portion that you can see in color, and then the dashed line is separate. But what this does, it allows us to get a start on what would need to be done for the future. And we could break that into two separate projects the way it's proposed, unless we get a really good price and there's a way to fund it all right now. So that's what you'll see right now. But so you will still have the offset intersection until the time where we can get the remaining fund to complete that. But the remaining portion will be less than what the portion is now, or it should be.
So if you're only putting that one in so far, and you're turning that into a four-way stop, and we're not doing the work at the other corner, what are you doing with that until that gets changed?
We've got some evaluation to do. Because of how the signal diagram works and how the signal mechanics work, this would basically become the four-way signalized intersection, and we'd be evaluating what to do with that other one if it was going to stay signalized or turn into some other kind of controlled intersection.
Oh, you don't know yet, okay.
Well, those two signals are timed together to make them work right. So whatever you did to the 90th Street one, you would have to modify the 91st Street to make it work. Lydiana would be working on that with BPU. That's above my expertise as far as signal timings.
I just had to harass him a little bit.
Wouldn't expect anything less.
No, thank you.
Again, and this is something that you'll see kick off here shortly in 2019 because of the accelerated time frame with the school. We didn't have this information ready for the prior presentation last month as a 2019 project because it was part of the amended budget. It wasn't really put out yet. Another thing you'll see in the budget is in 2019 is a large UG portion of this project, which is the I70 and Turner Diagonal interchange reconstruction. There's a lot of moving pieces to this. We actually had a conversation with senators today about how we can push this forward, but basically this would be taking the current cloverleaf type design and turning it into a diverging diamond. This does a lot for our community because it opens up a lot of developable land along this corridor, which would be a major corridor improvement along with what was already done at Turner Diagonal and the Riverview Bridge, how it was removed, and we've changed the speeds throughout the area and made it more appealing for development. Leavenworth Road Phase 2, we've kind of ran this one over several times, so we won't really go over it too much other than to say that currently we are in design and we're working with BPU already to try and get their stuff coordinated with. That way we're getting our stuff moved out of the way before the project kicks off in late 2020 and early 2021.
Question on that.
Sure.
Can you give us the breakdown, federal, state, local?
Off the top of my head, I don't know it just because we still are in design. We haven't bid it out, exact dollar-wise. I want to say we're thinking like $7 million is our piece. I want to say it's close.
Is it about 50-50 on this part of it? Do you remember?
Yeah, most of the federal projects end up being about 50-50, even though the match is 80-20 match. But by the time you do design and everything else right away and lump it in there, it usually ends up being about 50-50.
So ultimately, you're looking about 13 to 14 million for the whole stretch of the project. Our portion is about 7-ish.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
We've got two wastewater projects that we've mentioned several times, but they're both so large that they encompass several years and phased out. So we wanted to mention them again. That way everybody's still aware. Both of these will probably come back to you in individual sessions as they really kick off. That way you can have more information on them. The Walcott Treatment Plant, an update for everybody. We have currently accepted a bunch of construction manager at-risk proposals, and we're working with them to figure out which one we're going to go with. So we're really trying to push that one forward in a really effective manner that would get us a really good product and keeps us on that budgetary line, which is what a construction manager at-risk process does. The Caw Point Biosolids is improvements to our current Caw Point facility to handle our solids, and not only ours, but other adjacent cities' solids as well. Jeff will update you in our next little discussion about an agreement with KCMO on that. The Minnesota Avenue improvements, this is the next phase of what we've currently done over the past several years between 7th and 8th. This is moving between 6th and 7th. This is mainly streetscape work, improving some of the aesthetics around there and some of the parking. You may have noticed you've already seen some of the planters removed on the far east end. That was due to a BPU water line issue that had to get fixed. So we will be putting appropriate plantings back in those areas that are easy to maintain and still hold the look that we're going for as a true downtown type corridor. Our final phase of the Holiday Drive Bridge replacements, this will be phase 4, which is the large box structure that is right outside the Water One plant. There have been several, not really issues with this, but several large pieces and large players with the adjacency to Water One and a couple of the utilities that are really close to the north side of the road. So we're really focusing on that. We're looking at doing an alternate delivery type construction method with this, like a design build or another method similar to that, that we can discuss more at a different time whenever we get to it. But this one isn't really slated to begin construction until like late 2020. 131st and Leavenworth Road intersection. This is an intersection redesign that is in conjunction with the new school build out at on the southeast corner of 131st and Leavenworth Road. The current layout that we're looking at is one that's really similar to 115th and Leavenworth Road. So designated turn lanes, designated through lanes, storm drainage enhancements, and sidewalk connectability for future improvements, because there's not any sidewalk out in that area now, but if we're building something, put it in, that way it's there. In 2020, we're also looking to make some fire alarm adjustments to the courthouse. Our current system, as well as some new systems we're going to be putting in that have a non-audible system to them to meet ADA compliance. That way everybody's notified and not just people that have hearing capabilities. We're also currently working with sheriff and PD to determine if there are other security or safety needs on the justice side while we're going to be there and just get it all wrapped up together. We also have in the budget for 2020 and 2022 some budgeted monies for new fire stations. We've got $3 million in 2020 and $3.5 million in 2022. Currently, there hasn't been any discussion about what sites we could potentially look at, but based on the current estimates for the new Piper Fire Station we're currently looking at, there could be some budget adjustments in the future depending on what dollars we come in at and depending on if the template we come up with is something that's easily replicable fairly simply. So that'll be something that gets brought back before you in a future update when it gets time. In 2021, we've got our next phase of Safe Routes to School, which is creating sidewalk and connectability between Northwest Middle School and Carruthers Elementary, which is just north of 18th Street, around the 18th or Parallel Parkway and 18th Street. We're looking at sidewalks, connecting the two and throughout the neighborhood, and also some possible signal improvements at 18th Street and 12th Street if the funding levels cooperate, or if the dollar values of the project cooperate. Hutton and Leavenworth Road intersection reconstruction. This is a multi-phase project we've talked about with you in the past. Phase 1 will be the removal of the large hill on the east side of the project, as well as some lane marking improvements going back east towards I-435, and then an actual intersection redesign once we figure out what's going to go there and what kind of development might spur in the area and things like that.
Commissioner Kane.
just for the record, no roundabout. You got the fire trucks coming out of there, they're awful big, and it would be, slow them down to perform their function.
And we've talked about it before, we've done an initial study on that. That's in the 90-ish% complete right now. We should have that very soon. Whatever we recommend there will include capability for fire trucks.
Whatever you recommend to us, we'll tell you what to do.
That's fine. I'll just tell you what's recommended from the engineering staff.
Question on this phase one. Am I correct that directly east of phase one is that stretch of Leavenworth Road right before you get to phase one? 4 lanes?
Yes, it is.
And will phase one increase that 4 lanes all the way to Hutton or no?
So that will be something we look at. One thing we've done when we started our initial study is our plan we basically wanted to know the grading limits, what it would take to get back there. We've laid that out as a 4-lane section to get the room. Whether we actually build it or not, it'll at least have the right-of-way and the grading set up so it could be added to later if it needed to be.
Well, because in addition to the fire station and the park, we're getting a couple hundred units right there of housing, and I just wonder about increased traffic and whether 4 lanes would be good.
As Troy mentioned, there's several design options for it. One of them is a 4-lane section, but we are looking at that as the ultimate build out. Whether we build that initially, depending on traffic concerns, we might not do that, but we are buying the right of way, grading everything back, so it'd be easy to add those extra lanes if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Next big project that we've got coming up for City Hall is some stabilization in our lower areas of City Hall. We currently have an architect and engineer on board. They're doing their initial study and making some immediate kind of stabilization recommendations. Those repairs will begin in 2019. The full study itself will give us some other details as we move forward, and we'll be able to come back with some other options and how much those could potentially cost. Currently, we're budgeted at like about $10 million over the next 5 years. So those are just something to keep in mind as we move forward. But like I said, we'll be back to discuss that at length when the time comes. One of the annual projects that's semi-new in this year's budget is our green infrastructure improvements. As everybody's aware, we're under a consent decree with the EPA to clean up our stormwater quality. And one of the big ways you can do that is creating green infrastructure, rain gardens, catch basins, things like that hold water and allow it to absorb naturally into the ground as opposed to just flowing and reaching some of our combined sewers and things like that. So what we've kind of focused on is a corridor area kind of stemming from right over just to our west a little bit at kind of the 8th Street Park, moving all the way down through Big 11 Lake and ultimately ending up towards Jersey Creek. But there are several locations throughout that we'll be bringing forward in the next few years with real concrete plans. Next, we wanted to highlight a couple things that currently aren't in your budget, but they're things that are big pieces for us that we will be bringing up into the budget in this next budget cycle. So you'll see them coming up. We wanted to give you a little heads up and a little detail about what they really are. The first one we've kind of talked about a little bit is the Kaw River levee raise projects. This is as part of the 7 levee studies that we're doing or that have been completed. This is a joint operation between us, KCMO, the Cobb Valley Drainage District, the Army Corps of Engineers. Very huge, massive project, basically raising the height of our current levees. There are several things that need to happen along with this, and like in 2019, you're going to start seeing pump station improvements to handle increased flow capacity. 2019, 2020, you're really going to see some property acquisition, so there's nothing really to see there, but you might hear it being talked about. And then in 2020 to 2023 is when the raise is actually going to really happen. Overall, this is about a $450 million project. There's a very large portion of this, if not all, I believe, that's going to be federal funded. Most, if not all, is going to be federally funded. So it's a large number, but it's not a big impact on us. Jeff can elaborate on that at a future date once we get really into this, but we're still working out details with the government. The next one is actually a grant application that was submitted and didn't get turned back to us until right after this last budget cycle. As part of KDOT's C-CLIP program, which is the former program that deals with cities that maintain state roads. So for this one is 69 Highway, right outside of our offices here. We've looked at this intersection several times for MARC grants and things, and it just didn't receive the funding for it. But luckily, we got some funding this time. So at 7th and Central, everybody knows that tight intersection with the bank on the corner. We're looking at improving the turning radiuses and turning movements, some signal improvements, sidewalk connectivity. And as you can see from the picture, there's a lot of legs in close proximity to this intersection that create turning hazards, sight distance issues with the hill kind of coming to the north, and then having people kind of queuing at the stop sign or the stoplight here. So we're looking at potentially closing some of those or realigning things to make it a more functional intersection and allow traffic to flow better. Another element of this is possibly a road diet that will, as we mentioned with sidewalk, to allow walkability and bikeability through the area. So we'll be taking that into consideration as we do our design.
Commissioner Philbrook?
So between I-70 and 7 Highway, that little section on Central, there's a speedway right now. Well, I mean, I don't want to die walking to slaps, what can I say? And so people do have a tendency to really haul it through there as they're, coming up. And is there any plans to quiet that down a little bit in this?
Not as a part of this. When we redid that portion of Central Avenue, we did try and do a couple traffic calming things by creating some bulb outs through there and allowing parking kind of through there. As you've noticed, it didn't necessarily deter people how we had hoped. I know there are discussions about other possible options, but we haven't hashed any of those out just yet. But it is something that's on our radar.
Please hash. Yeah, no, because I've been getting feedback from quite a few of the business people when they go down to, and we're creating more and more small businesses in that area, and so we want people to feel safe when they spend their money with us. Thank you.
We will definitely keep kicking the tires on that one. Another big piece that could be seen in the next few years is our stormwater master plan and rate study that everybody's kind of been briefed on in prior presentations and other meetings. But basically this is to help us alleviate some of the major stormwater issues that we're having in the city by possibly looking at taking some of the rate funded money and putting them solely towards a different type of project scope. Currently in phase 1, which is really the next 10 years-ish, we're focusing on the highlighted drainage districts that are up here, and within each drainage district there'll be projects that come out of them and they'll be ranked according to some criteria that we've set up. So we'll have more concrete projects coming forward as far as being able to say exactly what we're doing, but this is going to be something you'll start seeing more of.
And for the rate study portion of it, this is the one we met with you on the on-threes to talk about this, and we've started setting up the neighborhood meetings, I believe, in a couple weeks, mid-December through mid-January. We have 8 or 9 meetings set up with multiple different neighborhood groups, businesses, et cetera, to get their input on a couple of different scenarios. We're talking about it changing the rates. So once we get that back and we've had time to analyze it and incorporate comments, we'll be back again to discuss that as well.
Could we have the dates, times, places? I wouldn't necessarily want to go to all those meetings, but I might want to go to 1 or 2.
Yeah, we just got those set up
Okay.
late last week, right before Thanksgiving, so we'll send out a notification of when those dates are. We'll have them back together.
Okay.
Our data-driven street preservation program, which we just kind of went over at length, so I won't go over this slide with you anymore, but it is another big piece that is going to see a lot of emphasis in our implementation of the budget and how we request money from you all moving forward. Anybody have any questions about that?
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. The Safe Routes to School, part of that is funded through Mid-America Regional Council.
Yes, correct.
2021, is that the year? I thought it was 2019, 2020. Am I wrong on that?
The way it's phased out is the major construction won't really happen until 2021. We've got some budgetary dollars associated with design, but you won't see a lot of the work done until 2021.
What's the estimated cost on that?
we're still in early estimations on that. The dollar value that we got from Mid-America Regional Council on that was about 500,000, if I remember right, or is that the one we got more?
It's more, I think it's more, I think the total project cost, and I'm guessing here based off memory from months ago, but I think it was like 1.2 or 3 million total.
Oh, yeah, I would expect it would be that much plus some for.
And I think we ended up getting, we got 2 separate grants from Mark for that. So one was the 500,000, what Brandon was talking about. It's what we typically get for the Safe Routes project. But we also got a separate one as well to merge together.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments for this item? Well, thank you very much. And we'll move right into our last item on this agenda. We have Jeff Fisher. He's going to bring us an update on the Unified Government Kansas City, Missouri Cooperative Agreement for Long-Term Biosolids Treatment.
Thank you. My report will be very brief.
Thank you.
But I'll entertain any questions you might have. And
Okay.
Mr. Brown's been involved the whole time too. So, real simply, staff, along with legal, has been working on an RFQ. We believe that'll be out in the next 60 days, and request for qualifications for a design build contract. We've also identified our owner's rep, and we're negotiating scope and fee there as well. In the meantime, since we last spoke of this project, and this is the biosolids project, just so everybody listening knows, we've had a few discussions with KCMO. Those discussions have been very positive. And we have a little bit of final testing to make sure the system, we understand by receiving their solids, how our system will handle that. So that should be done this year. And so we've had initial discussions about a potential wholesale long-term contract. And if everything plays out well, and we still have a lot of discussion around rates and that kind of thing. So there's still a little ways to go on it. But we would come to you with a long-term contract sometime in the first quarter to second quarter of 2019, I would guess. In the meantime, if that testing plays out well and we believe it's in the UG's best interest, we would come to you with that agreement. They also have talked about a hard commitment through a letter of commitment or something like that in the meantime. So it appears to be very positive. It would be a 2-year construction project. And I should say, this is very important to the UG to, instead of landfilling our waste like we've talked about, we need to take steps to correct that and get our plant working again so that we can process biosolids. We will need to make a decision. If KCMO doesn't appear we're going to be able to come to some agreement, we'll need to go forward without them. So we're prepared to do this project either way. So I'll take any questions you may have.
So she doesn't find this very exciting, but then she never worked down there.
Yeah.
When you work down there in among it, you know, it kind of comes home to you to realize that we have a lot of stuff to deal with. So I'm really happy that we're thinking about working with KCMO, because that's the only way we're going to get rid of that smell, number one, because it's not coming from us down there. It's coming from them.
That is correct.
And the other thing is as I understand it then, us changing our process and bringing them in will help pay for all the changes that we're planning on making in the processing, that sort of thing. So they'll help pay for that.
They would pay for their project and a little bit extra, right?
Okay. Thank you.
But I think more importantly, the two together generate enough material that there is big potential for UG to generate even more revenues, which is really the thing we would all
get
like.
to sell that, right?
That would help us manage rates more effectively than the KCMO component. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Any questions, comments? Thank you, sir, very much, and we know we'll hear more on that later.
Yes.
And that is our last agenda item for this committee, so this committee is adjourned. Mr. Groneman, thank you, as always, appreciate you. And we will hand it over to Commissioner Markley for Administration and Human Services.
Allowing for the changing of the guard there, I will now call the meeting of the Administration and Human Services Standing Committee to order. I want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You'll have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please, everyone, use your microphones. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call. Philbrook.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Here. Bynum.
Here.
Markley.
Here. Our first order of business is the minutes from our September 17th meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Those minutes have been approved. We have 4 items in our committee agenda, and item number 1 is an ordinance amending private on-site wastewater systems regulations. I'll ask James Baines from Legal to present this item.
Good evening, Commissioners. With me is Rollin Sachs. He's the Division Director of Air Quality and Environmental Health, and Jim McDaniel, who is an Environmental Health Specialist, and they can take you through some of the details.
Good evening. This is a pretty straightforward proposal that we are wanting to update, and I've got a few bullet points that I'd just like to point out the major changes. We're going to formalize the construction permitting process, including application requirements, field data standards, and on-site inspections. We will require septic tank installers to be licensed and outline the licensing procedure. That's going to increase customer service and better protect public health. This update will align the UG code with minimum state standards that have been updated since the last revision to this code. It will allow sewage holding tanks for commercial businesses, which is something the current code doesn't address. And additionally, it will modernize and specify requirements for absorption fields, lateral locations of septic tanks, capacities, and the soil testing process. So that's it in a nutshell.
Commissioner Philbrook?
So then that means that would help our properties that are north of the ridge up toward the Missouri River in some type of adaptive sewage control, because us hooking up to our sewer system up there is, way too expensive. So then we could possibly develop that area, those areas up there then. I know that's kind of an off-the-wall question for you, but the folks that have to deal with our sewers, we've had several groups of people wanting to come in and develop up north of there, and none of their sewer treatment possibilities were allowed in our codes and the way we had things. So that's why I asked that question.
It would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, but possibly.
But it opens it up for a more...
The update does allow for some non-traditional systems in those that have a limited footprint. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
One note I would make on that question, if I can, in the citywide master plan that was already adopted, it calls for a minimum 3 acres for a septic system. This code has been 1 acre minimum traditionally. It remains 1 acre in this proposal and update. So there is that bit of inconsistency, but it's a policy decision for you all.
Well, so that's making an assumption that that's the only type of system you could use. And I'm assuming that, I don't want to get too much down the weeds, but we're already there. Real quickly, there's combinations of hydroponics along with all other kinds of ways to utilize, a complete control system where none of it leaves the property. You have 10 acres. I'm just remembering off the top of my head a proposal that was made to put in a place that they grew their own food, and they had, certain number of apartments, and they took care of all their own waste. But at the time, when they came with that proposal, we didn't have the leeway, as I understand it, to put that all together and address that. That's what I'm saying. And so you're saying that repeat what you said again so I exactly understand it.
I was saying in the traditional septic system, the citywide master plan that was already adopted specifies a minimum of 3 acres to
Have a septic system.
have a septic system. This code, the current code is 1 acre minimum. This updated code is 1 acre minimum as well. And so there is that inconsistency. As I understand it, a 3 acre lot was presented to the commission years ago, and the commission did not approve that change. And so that's why we left it.
We're still at 1.
And we're still at 1. And this update is at 1. But the citywide master plan that was adopted lists 3 acres minimum.
Rob, you want to come forward? Sorry, Rob. I didn't even see you sitting there.
It's just a bonus that he's here for a later item.
I know, but I wanted to understand what they were up to.
So when we approve a development plan, we use the master plan. So if somebody rezones property and does a subdivision, they'll be held to the 3 acre standard. That doesn't affect existing systems, or, you know, the instance that you spoke about would have been on a much larger tract.
Right.
So that wouldn't have come into effect. But the real concern is in places where you don't have good soil, being able to replace those, because these systems do fail. And you can't necessarily rebuild it in the exact same place. And so we've been having people make sure they have at least 2 places on them. And we've, you know, since it's in the master plan, it's a suggested guideline. We've had people, you know, like between 2.5 and 3 acres in a couple of situations, but generally we've been at 3 acres for those. And that's, you know, that was, I don't know when an ordinance was presented, but the master plan was adopted by the Board of Commissioners in 2012 that says 3 acres. So that's what we've been following, and that's what we'll continue to follow. This just creates confusion for the people that read the ordinance and think they can do an acre, and then they come say me to do a subdivision, and I say, no, you can't do that.
So does that sound, so that sounds to me like we need to figure out what we really want our policy to be, huh?
Well, I mean, the policy, the master plan is the policy. This is just the code that implements
until we change it if we choose to.
Right.
That's our job. You're doing your job. I'm just trying to find out for sure what our job is in this, you know, because I can't tell you what to do. That would not be good. You have a boss.
Yes, you do. I mean, yes, you can. I'm sorry.
I can try, but I know the answer to that. But anyway, so no, I just wanted to understand, you know, the confusion between that. And so I understand the confusion in it, and so maybe that's a future conversation to get it taken care of. So, all righty.
Are there additional questions from the commission or from the public? So Commissioner Philbrook, are you comfortable moving forward tonight with the idea that in the future we might need to discuss this conflict?
I do think we need to discuss the conflict because we legislate and create ordinances and policies, and it's our job to not make it as more difficult for everybody, but to make it easier for folks. So yeah, I think we need to come together to have another conversation about this.
Okay. Staff, can you make note of that request? That being said, if we're going to move forward on this item, I will need a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Roll call. Philbrook.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Bynum.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Item number 2 consists of revisions to our HR guide policies. Renee Ramirez, our Human Resources Director, is here with her team to present. It says this item, but it's actually multiple revisions.
Good evening, Commissioners. This evening I have with me to my left Bonnie Blosser, who's our Benefits Administrator. To my right, Brian Johnston, who is our Consultant for Healthcare, and Shakiva Christian, the HR Manager. HR is presenting 3 policies, the first of many revisions to the Human Resources Guide. These revisions to the HR Guide are just to comply with current practices and updates on current federal laws. The first is the healthcare benefits policy that we'd like to have some revisions for consideration to approve. Those are just to comply with some of the practices that we've been having. The last time we revised this policy was several years ago, so we've just made some minor modifications to that. The second one is the Employee Assistance Program. Again, that's just to comply with some of the practices that we've instituted on the Employee Assistance Program. And then the last is the Flexible Spending Account. Those changes are just to comply with some of the ACA updates that have taken place.
And I will note for anyone watching this meeting that those edits are available in the agenda. Because of the nature of the edits, we're not going to walk through everyone. And I would say I appreciate the fact that you took advantage of the opportunity to just make some edits that clear things up and shorten things up. So that is appreciated as well. Are there any questions from the committee on individual items?
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Anyone from the public? Roll call on the motion. And this is one motion to approve all 3 sets of revisions, correct? Yes? Okay. Yeah.
Roll call. Philbrook.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Bynum.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is in regard to updating the citywide master plan. Rob Richardson, our Director of Planning, is coming up once again to present this item, which he was officially on the agenda for.
Thank you. You may know that while we just talked about the citywide master plan, and that covers the entire city, we have not addressed in a specific way all areas of our community. And as we were addressing the Northeast Area Master Plan, we realized that we were telling people, well, this is, and it was being stated as this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And that's really not the right way to do planning, because it puts us way beyond our CMIP. It puts us way beyond any kind of reasonable time horizon for a lot of short-term actions. And so Zach has put together a program that would allow us to touch every part of the city every 5 years within what's currently allocated for planning purposes in our budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Zach and let him present his great idea.
Thank you, Rob. So basically this came up as we do more and more area plans. We've done a lot of planning work since 2004-ish. Before that, I don't think we had updated any of our plans since about 1989. And so we've done a lot of this great work, and I want to make sure that we're not painting ourselves into a corner as we do more and more area plans, and that we're doing it in a way that it all fits together into one whole and that we can touch each part of the city. So I'll get into this. First of all, I just wanted to point out that, comprehensive plan or master plan, they're interchangeable terms really, is authorized by our state statute. This came around in the 1920s as zoning and planning became more popular in cities, and it calls out some specific items about the plan is used for land use, building standards, public facilities, transportation, natural resources, a financial plan for public facilities and capital improvements, and an implementation plan. So it really is kind of a comprehensive, overarching policy document that addresses nearly everything a city does. And all departments should be looking at the comprehensive plan when they're doing their work to make sure that their work complies with the comprehensive plan, which is the stated policy of the city. And so why do it? For me, the most compelling reason is that we are all public servants, and it's a chance for us to go out and talk to the community and make sure that all of our work is aligning with the community's vision and the community's goal. It's also the one chance we have to really look at the big picture and look at demographic trends, trends in the economy and real estate, and look at long-term where we're going as a city. It's a chance to build an informed constituency and involve a broad array of interests and discussion about the future. That's what we do with our steering committees. We have people who are meeting who don't normally talk to each other, and coordinating local decision-making with other entities like BPU or the school board, and then give guidance and reduce uncertainty for landowners and developers. I really think planning can help generate economic development because it reduces uncertainty. So what we're doing now, I mean, this is our citywide master plan, and I just wanted to point out that even when we did the citywide master plan, we had several area plans with the Piper plan. This is refer to downtown plan, Armourdale and Rosedale. We are just completing the Northeast master plan, and then the next year we'll be starting on the central area plan. And so we're at a point now where we have really more area plans than we have citywide master plan. So I want to make sure that as we continue to do area plans, I think that's the right approach, that we aren't painting ourselves in the corner. And another issue is, we have all these great plans, but they're all, a little bit different in how they're organized. And I think consolidating the format and making sure that we're making them very consistent can help the usability of these plans. And then we also have other plans that either address corridors or specific issues that kind of overlap, so it's difficult to know sometimes which plan to refer to. And I think that this can help clear that up as well. So the proposal is that we create 9 districts for area planning. And I've shown these as bubbles on the map here. We've done some work about thinking about where the exact boundaries are, but for now I just wanted to present this as bubbles. So this would be 9 areas and then a citywide update that we would do on a rotating basis, so allow us to touch each area every 5 years. And if we use a consistent methodology, outline, and formatting, that we're not reinventing the wheel each time, allows us to do it more efficiently. And I think that we can use the staff that we have. We have a lot of talented people that work for the UG, and involve more of the departments, which we're already doing this with our steering committees, but I think we can do more of this. And that'll allow us to be more efficient as well. And so how this could work is that right now we're getting started in the central area plan, and we're anticipating that would be completed in 2019 along with the zoning code update. And then we could start doing one of these plans and kind of having them overlap a little bit so that we are starting one as we're completing the next one and getting 2 each year. I think another advantage of this is that it would align with their CMIP budget, because right now we're looking at long-term visions, which we'd still be doing with these plans, but we would know how much money we have in the next 5 years to actually implement, so we can talk about the real things, the real steps that we're going to take in the next 5 years to get to the long-term vision.
I would just add to that one point, and that's sometimes when you look at the whole master plan, you say, how much is this going to cost? And some of it's visionary, it's not all going to be our money, but with this type of approach, we can align that to the CMIP, and we can say that these are things that we're going to go make CMIP requests for in this 5-year period, and they may or may not all be funded, but that's what, and you'll have direct input from the community on each one of these on a rotating basis for where they want to be over 5 years.
And then I just wanted to give a quick example of our neighbor across the river here, across the state line. They do a similar way of doing their plans where they have 18 area plans, and they've actually updated all of them. At least the oldest one is 2010, and they're actually redoing that one now, which is the Greater Downtown Area Plan. So it's very similar to what many other cities are doing, including Kansas City, Missouri. So with that, I wanted to just keep it quick, but it's not a real complex proposal. Just want to make sure we're not painting ourselves in the corner, that we're have a better organizational framework that has a better user experience, that we don't have overlapping plans, and that we align it better with our budget and the CMIP plan.
Thank you. I love this idea. I think it will create much more usable plans than the 20-year tomes we used to create and then throw in the corner, so I appreciate it. Commissioner Kane?
I think it's outstanding, because in 5 years, something's going to change. And in 5 years, there might be some other school that comes up or some other business who wants to come in, and we're not prepared for it. So I think it's a great idea.
Commissioner Bynum?
I just want to echo Commissioner Kane. That is so true, and I think we're seeing that in Piper right now. But also, I think it invites more community engagement into these processes, and we can never go wrong by doing that, so I appreciate it.
I want to echo both of them. There's an echo in the room. But, yeah, you might as well chime in, too. But I really do love the concept, because we have been kind of, in the past, kind of knee-jerk reaction to things, and we okay, it's time to do this again. It may have been 10 years, and it's so outdated, so worthless for us to use that it's like, why did we ever do it? And we hear from our constituents, at least I do, like, why do you create a master plan? You're not doing anything. You're not creating anything with it. What are you going to do? I'm like, well, let's see. That one was 10 years old, and it won't fit into what we need to do now.
Have them call me, I can tell them what we've been doing. We keep track of that.
No, I'm afraid you would. But, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. But, the point being, as they said, when you get more community involvement on a regular basis, then they feel part of the decision, and you don't hear that as much. So thank you for doing this hard work.
Commissioner Johnson, I saw you hit your light.
I'm obligated to say something, aren't I? Of course, I am all for this. It creates activity, creates new thoughts every 5 years. The question I have, though, is will it require more resources, i.e. Staffing, money, et cetera?
So we currently have money allocated in two places in the budgets. There's some in a consulting line item and there's some in the capital plan. But if you put those two numbers together, it's about $300,000 a year, which will allow us to do the two planning processes. Zach will be the leader of those processes. I think for the foreseeable future, that amount is adequate, and we'll be able to move forward under that budget number if it continues like that and it's consolidated into one budget number. The thing that we'll look at as we move forward is, would it be worthwhile to have another full-time staff member that could offset that money in a more significant way and get more bang for our buck by having somebody internally working on that? We'll be evaluating that as we move forward, and we'll bring that to you all as we move through each year's budget and we look at how we could or should have done something differently or can do it differently in the future. Zach's been giving that a lot of thought, but as you know, the central area plan is scheduled in 2019. I think with this process, we would be able to move the Armourdale plan to start mid-2019 instead of waiting until 2020. And then we will, those are the two that are on the table. So then we will come back to you with a plan for how to get the rest of them and the specific boundaries and those kind of things. But that's where we would move forward from right now.
So rough math, you'd be doing 2 updates per year on a rolling basis.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And a couple of them will be new. I mean, when we go to the, between 635 and 435 and we go to Turner, those in Argentine really have never had any plans. So those won't be an update. Those will be brand new the first time. So I'm very much looking forward to getting into those parts of the community and talking to those people.
How will we look at then also like the State Avenue plan, the Parks Master Plan, and all of the other ancillary plans that we have? How will we incorporate, will we incorporate those?
So we left the number at 9 intentionally because we know that we will have something else we need to update on that other, when that might be a citywide effort, it might be a sidewalk and trail plan. The Parks Plan is kind of outside of what we do. That's in the Parks Department. We'll incorporate that. And we will, as we go through these, we will incorporate the relevant portions into that so that we know that, you only have to look at one document, and we will incorporate those as we move forward for the State Avenue plan or the K32 plan, and those will get incorporated and updated as we move forward.
We don't have to approve it. It is for information only. But I'm sure they're happy to know that we are all nodding our approval.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So we will move forward with this and outline it in the budget, and we will be back with boundary lines and proposed sequencing that'll might be have a more interesting discussion. Thank you for your comments tonight.
Thank you. All right, our last item is a status update of municipal court's actions regarding parking violation citations, and Crystal is, and Judge Brakovic are making their way forward. They've been patiently waiting to present this final item. Welcome.
This is for information only, but Commissioner Green, if you would like to.
All right, so we're here this afternoon or this evening to update the commission on municipal court's parking citation enforcement effort. I want to thank Judge Brakovic for accompanying me tonight. Judge Ryan is out and unable to attend, and Rhonda Green, the manager from Parking Control, is with me as well. So the purpose of the presentation, which will be brief this evening, is to provide information regarding the course of action that municipal court took to improve processing of parking citations, not only to the commission, but also to the citizens. Tonight. You each should have a prepared fact sheet. I hope that you have that for overview, but I'm going to give a little bit more context. In 2016, the court adopted a strategic management plan. We shared that plan with the commission and the mayor in April of that year. During the internal evaluation process to get to our strategic management plan, it was pretty clear to us that we had some ineffective processing when it came to parking citations, both those written by police officers, uniformed officers, and parking control enforcement. As context, parking citations make up about 22% of all cases filed in the municipal court. So the low prioritization of parking citations over several years resulted in a large amount of unprocessed tickets. And when I say large amount, it was an extraordinary amount. Many areas had been seriously impacted. The four most important were identified is the years of inaction had resulted in a learned complacency, not only from our citizens and violators, but also from our staff and the people who write and process those tickets. We taught ourselves and the community not to take parking violations and tickets seriously. Uneven application of the court's duties to efficiently process all cases filed were seriously impacted. Not allowing ourselves to see those tickets as the same as any other ticket provided a bias on the court's perspective to say these are just parking tickets. We had a decrease in the deposits to parking lot improvement fund, and that definitely impacted what parking control could do and what the city could do to improve the neighborhood areas and parking lot availability for citizens. And what I consider the most concerning of all those impacts was the unfair treatment to citizens who feed the meter, who pay their tickets on time, who follow the city ordinance by parking legally, and to those who need access to that parking, not only at 3900 Adams, but also at 600 Minnesota. So the effective and efficient enforcement of parking tickets was identified in our 3-year strategic management plan as goal 1.11. We got to work isolating the barriers, and we looked at barriers both perceived and real, old and new. At the time of the review, we had some 48,000 open parking citations, and we were adding 7,000 per year to that backlog. So we knew by some quick math that by the end of 2018, we would be looking at in excess of 70,000 open parking citations that did not have resolution. An additional barrier where those tickets were filed with our court without a registered owner's name and with some limited information. We had tag numbers, VIN numbers possibly, maybe a color of the vehicle, but no person to tie that to. At the time, we did not have appropriate staffing levels to look up each individual ticket, each individual VIN, and relate that back to a registered owner. We also had some serious questions and concerns about our data conversion in 2014, which had tickets that had been fully paid reported as unpaid in our current computer system. We had concerns about duplicate ticket entry, malfunctioning e-citation machines, and quite frankly, substandard data entry and ticket chain of command concerns. There was the issue of age. How could we be looking at a fair resolution on cases for parking that were over 4 years old? It was incredibly overwhelming, but we saw it as not an impossibility, and we had to make changes on several fronts over a period of 3.5 years. So we embarked on a 3-year multi-stem plan that spanned between 2016 and 2019 to compensate for those barriers while addressing the issues moving forward so we did not find ourselves back in the same situation. Some of those highlights include in 2016, we went through a thorough evaluation. We changed our ticket entry and change of command processes. We addressed the e-ticket machines and the malfunctioning equipment that we had. By judicial order, we dismissed all parking violations that were issued prior to January 1 of 2014, and we removed all late fees from the remaining parking tickets, to name a few. The second step was to clean. We had a lot of data to clean individually. So we did an individual review of any case with a zero balance and any offense date prior to 2013, and in that year individually reviewed and closed 26,000 cases, one at a time. In early 2018, we moved into review and testing. We wanted to test the approach to see how long it would take us internally with our current staffing levels to research, to send notice, and to find disposition on cases. We embarked on that by notifying about 100 violators who had 10 or more active parking tickets, and at the conclusion of that, found that this was not something we had the capability of doing internally. It would take us several years to be able to go through those tickets. So we considered outsourcing, and we wanted to outsource to a vendor that was a trusted vendor, worked with legal, and identified the Collections Bureau of Kansas, who is a trusted vendor who works with 88 other cities across the state. They had access to DMV records and personal locators that we did not, including historical data. They were not going to be contracted to send any information to credit reporting bureaus, but rather help us at no cost to the UG locate possible violators, notify them, and collect. They also were the lowest cost agency per ticket per individual, so we did not want to impact our community anymore with late fees or considerable fees on top of the $30 or $35 average parking fine. In late 2018, we moved into the collections process. August the 15th is when the first set of collections letters went out. I'm sure that you guys got phone calls on August the 17th, because our office certainly had an increase in telephone calls. Collections letters went out on violation dates 2014 through 2016. We continued to do a lot of cleanup and a lot of review and a lot of customer service, but we also send out just recently public notifications in the e-news. The citizen will have a publication and we compose this fact sheet. At the end of this year, we will have closed close to 52,000 parking tickets, some paid, some closed for inability to enforce, all different types of manner, but every single one of those parking tickets have been looked at by my staff individually. In early 2019, we're going to institutionalize this change, mainly for the 2017 and 2018 tickets that are still open. We're sending notice from the court to the defendant to let them know they have an outstanding parking violation. We've already started to identify anyone who has recently received 10 or more parking violations and sent them individual notice through certified mail. And in 2019, which is our biggest change yet, we will notice the defendants or registered owner by mail within 30 days of receipt of a ticket. So those are the major changes moving forward. So lessons learned here for us at municipal court have been many. One of them has been not to underestimate early public and often notice. We underestimated the number of citizens that it would touch, these letters would touch that went out. So we have learned our lesson there, as well as early notice to internal stakeholders so that they might be better prepared. This had a huge impact on our 311 department. And so being able to notice them early and often so that we could be prepared. And also increase our internal customer service preparations and invest up front so that we are sending letters to citizens, not necessarily from a vendor, but from us. But ultimately, the lesson learned here has been one that we knew from the start, which was to never find ourselves in this situation again. We did have some great positives that I'd like to cite. One has been our team customer support and service. It's really been tested over the last 2.5 months, But my team has been wonderful. They've dealt with citizens who have called, dealt with cases, and we have moved those along. I'd also like to say I've got some early indications that behavior has been changing. So as a court, both the judges and I agree that behavior modification is our job. We want to modify compliance. And we're seeing some early indications that tickets that were issued in 2018 are getting paid at or resolved, I should say, not just paid, at a faster rate. But most of all, I think the positive outcome might be, in a year when we look back, that we've got a quality improvement to our court, as well as modified our behavior internally and externally, and then preserved those places to park for our citizens when they come downtown to do business or to go to slaps. And any questions that you guys might have?
Commissioner Bynum?
I don't know if it's a question, maybe you do have the answer. It strikes me as one that maybe we won't ever know the answer to, and it might be screen maybe that would need to come forward. But, you know, what we were hearing, what alerted us to your efforts, if you will, were the people contacting us, numerous people, to say, I've got a letter. I was never, ever given a parking ticket. And we heard that not from two people, you know, we heard it from a lot of people. And that to me is the mystery that I don't know that I've heard the answer to yet. Where are the missing parking tickets that never got placed on vehicles?
Well, service is an interesting issue. So it's the service of the ticket to the defendant. First, let me say, moving forward, we shouldn't have that issue because we will be notifying them if we have not heard from them within 30 days. But let me address it in a couple of ways. Legally, it's not the court to decide whether or not, now I say court, the clerk's office, to decide whether or not the citizen got service. It's a slippery path for us to go down in the clerk's office if we start saying, oh, you must not have gotten the ticket, so it must be. It is more appropriate for us to get that person in front of a judge so a judge can make that decision, and the city has to prove that service was delivered. With that being said, there are a couple of things that I would note. One would be, as we are going through this case closure process, we are keeping track of how cases are brought to us. So what is the citizen's complaint? And we're tracking that so that we can reflect it back to the departments and say, we've had this % of complaints have been for no service.
Okay.
The last thing that I would say was, normally with a parking ticket, you have a limited amount of time that the court is open to you for protest. Because we knew these tickets were old, we wanted to open that time frame up and say to any citizen who has gotten any notice, if you did not get service, please let me make a time and place for you to get in front of a judge so that that service issue can be addressed.
I did appreciate that. I mean, I appreciated very much the professional way that you and the department handled, you know, the aftermath, if you will. I mean, I sincerely appreciate that. I just was, yeah, it was just baffling because it was people who, well, they don't strike you as folks who would just shred a parking ticket. You know, people who work downtown and they know what the parking is. I'm saying downtown because those are the people I was hearing from.
Well, I always try to say, Commissioner, as a court clerk, and to train my court clerks, that we're not here to pass judgment. If we were, we'd be sitting on a different place in the courtroom. But we don't get to pass judgment whether or not you're a good person or a bad person, or you're not telling the truth or you are telling the truth. I need to get you in front of the person who can help make that decision.
Also, I'd like to add to one thing that she doesn't always toot her own horn as far as how organized she is. One of the things we were looking at, and she has this extensive grid, is who was making the complaints for lack of service. What agency did they come back to? And at that point in time when we looked at it, there was no pinpointing, which is unusual with the service issue. So the people that write parking tickets for us are KU Police. KCK Police, our parking control, and our sheriff's office. And what we found is kind of across the board, everybody was complaining about service issues. Well, what that happens, of course, is not everybody is having service issues, but when somebody trips and falls into a good defense, then it's really hard for us to identify, was there an actual service issue or was there not? So that was one of the issues that kind of popped up with this.
I also imagine, given the shorter time frame going forward, it will be easier to look back and say, what day were you downtown? Were there 80-mile-per-hour winds that day? What sort of issues might there be where when it was 4 years old, there was no way to do that kind of research and figure out what might have happened?
Well, and I will also say that Ms. Green and I have a meeting later this week, and one of the things that I will be presenting to her is an idea that possibly if we have increased our parking control improvement fund, maybe what the officers should be afforded is some ability to take pictures. And so if they have the ability to take pictures, then that alleviates some of that concern of that's not my car or I didn't get service. And certainly then the court following back up and sending notice within 30 days.
Commissioner Philbrook, did you have something?
I'm so happy that we're looking at this in the rearview mirror now, and I'm sure you are. The initial influx to myself was more of shock and dismay from the folks that called me. They were like, well, I would have paid that if I knew it was there. And I'm like, okay, all right, And my first response, because they got one, and I said, well, don't pay anything, don't do anything, let me find out what's going on, because this could be a scam. And, and that's how it came across at first. It was like, whoa, what is this? And so I found out right away and called several of those folks and told them, no, it's legit. Make sure you talk to Crystal or to the court and get them taken care of, whatever you have to do. And I did get good positive feedback. They were very pleased, Crystal, with you.
Oh, thank you.
How you handled things. They thought you were very professional and, just came in and paid what they owed and are happy little campers. They just didn't like having something like that out against them because they're, And I'm glad you did clean this up. It's very easy to find issues, but it's when you go above and beyond to actually take care of them and clean them up that is really phenomenal.
When I say we've closed 52,000 cases, that hasn't been me. That's my staff for the last 2 years who have done nothing but look at parking tickets. But in all fairness, when it's 22% of all of our filing volume, we should be paying that much attention to them. So my staff has painstakingly gone through each one of those tickets, and we know better, we do better.
Well, we know you can't do it by yourself, but you are the leader.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional comments?
Nope.
Well, this is an item for information only, as Crystal mentioned, so it is our last item on the agenda. Thank you for your attendance, and we are adjourned.